Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
With Mike McGuire.
Stand up, son. Let me take a good look at you.
This guy's a serious professional.
You know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, the professional wrestling. Do I have your attention now?
Done shilling. I'm done shilling, okay?
Let's get this show on the road.
I love professional wrestling.
What's old is new, what's new is even newer, and what's next is up to anybody's guess, because it is a crazy time to be a fan of professional wrestling, but we are just that, and that's what we talk about every week here on McGuire on Wrestling, part of the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed, as well as available on the radio near you. If you would like to get this show on a radio station near you, reach out to me. I'll tell you how to do that a little bit later on in the show. But welcome back. A little bit of a fresher sound for the new year as we get ready to delve back into weekly coverage of the world of pro wrestling. We talk about the storylines. We talk about the business. We talk about all the stuff in between as well. And we also invite you to be a part of the conversation. Now the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. We have the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Same as the one before. They used to be the Team MOW, McGuire on Wrestling Facebook page. Now just look up Celebrate Wrestling and you can join us there. And also want to invite you to be a part of us in the future here. We're going to be opening up some platforms here soon for you to be a part of general conversations on the regs. And again, always free, always about pro wrestling. That's a big mantra we have here. We have a bunch of shows that run every week on the podcast feed. So if you're listening on the radio, not only do you get this weekly show, but you get a bunch of other shows as well, including the alternate commentary table, which will return this Saturday, middle of the week. We're going to take you back in time with some Royal Rumble classic moments with Andy Evans and Legends and Champions. He's got a whole series of those lined up for this month. And we've seen a movie. Myself and Joe Aguinaldo get together to pick apart the movies of John Cena's career, and we are going to be doing that once again now that John Cena is back in WWE for his farewell tour. And nobody more appropriate to have on than Joe later on in the show. We're going to talk about John Cena and his looming retirement as he made his return on WWE's Raw Netflix debut. Lots happened on that show. Lots happened over in Japan. Lots happened here in Canada. Lots are happening on the independent scene. From the independents to international, we cover it all. And again, we invite you to be a part of it through our social media channels. You can find me anywhere at McGuire Show on all the major socials. And you can also contact me directly, McGuireShow@yahoo.com. If you want to send out an email, do some business talk, we can do that too. But in the meantime, we're here to talk about pro wrestling. The holiday hullabaloo has come and gone. If you missed those episodes, I highly invite you to go back and check them out. A really, really nice interview with Bret the Hitman Hart, talking about the good things going on in his life. Also, we had WWE SmackDown General Manager Nick Aldis and his wife Mickie James together on the show. Big thanks to Greg Oliver from Slam Wrestling for coming on, as well as our friend RJ City from AEW. Always a gas talking to him. We had some special guests pop up as well, like, Dan the Mouth Lavransky, the entire podcast crew. We had a round table and a lot of fun conversation about wrestling and not about wrestling. And I've also lined up some big names to come up in the future here. In fact, one I've been bugging to get on the show for a few years now. And finally, he's decided to come aboard. He's actually going to be launching a podcast soon. So I want to save it for the big announcement, but it's coming up soon. Again, you'll find out everything first on that Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. I want to give a shout out to Pure Power Wrestling here in Lethbridge. Again, this is the local indie fed I talk about all the time. They put on great shows every month. I do some backstage interviewing for them, do some video work here and there, but just a great group of guys and girls who like to put on wrestling shows. And the fans are unreal. Like, honestly, every show, 300 to 400 people, which in a town of about 100,000, that's not bad at all. That's really good numbers for that, and they pack the house every time they do a show. Plus, I get to meet more fans. I get to reach out. I met a guy named Chris this week who is a big wrestling fan and also a big autograph hound. And so we were talking about how Bret Hart is coming to Lethbridge here to do some signings for his Romero rum. which will be very exciting. And Brett's going to be on the show here coming up talking about that, as well as on my radio show. And we're also going to talk about some other things. But lots to come down the pipe. But this week, I just wanted to get back in the groove, get back to doing shows here. We've got everybody ready to go and geared up to repopulate your podcast feed. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do so under Celebrate Wrestling. And, of course, if you're listening to us on the radio, support those radio stations as well, because without them, there is no us, and we really, really love being here. Coming up this week, we have a few things to talk about in the time we've been gone, including, of course, WWE's launch to Netflix, which happened in the U.S. for Monday Night Raw and internationally for all the content. We're really getting a steal of a deal here in Canada and other places. We'll talk about that. Plus, the Hulk Hogan situation. Yeah, we have to go there. It made worldwide headlines and unfortunately was one of the biggest things to come out of the WWE Netflix debut as far as mainstream media coverage went. We'll also touch on AEW as they are now simulcasting on Max and where you can and can't see them in the future. And New Japan Pro Wrestling had an interesting weekend in the Tokyo Dome last week. We'll talk about those subjects and more with the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer, who is also back with us. Plus, Joe Aguinaldo and I will jump into the possible scenarios for John Cena's retirement year. We all know it's happening. We all know the last time is now. But is he going to be a 17-time world champion in WWE? Is he going to retire as champion? Will he win the Royal Rumble? Or will it all be just one long farewell? That's coming up, but first, let's take a look at some of the latest headlines. Here it is. It's the 5 Count.
You want to hear the breaking news?
Well, one of the bigger stories outside of WWE's Netflix debut is the fact that for the first time ever, the Royal Rumble will be held on foreign soil outside of North America. Of course, the first Royal Rumble took place in Hamilton, Ontario. It was a made-for-TV special, really. Only featured 20 competitors back then. But every other time, it's taken place somewhere in North America. Until next year, when WWE will take the Royal Rumble proper to Saudi Arabia. Now, this, of course, is part of that 10-year deal they have with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Fans had mixed reactions about it, but what's interesting about this is that until the Royal Rumble, right now WWE only has one other Saudi Arabia show lined up when there used to be at least 2 per year. Overall, WWE has done 12 premium live events with their deal and opened the WWE Experience in Riyadh, which is a live interactive attraction. Well, like a lot of folks listening, our hearts go out to the people of Los Angeles and Southern California that have been dealing with those wildfires, which have burned large parts of LA and the county around it. Now, a story wrestling related came out earlier about this, and that had to do with Melina Perez, the former WWE Women's Champion. Of course, she made her debut with M&M back in the day, and it was actually reported as missing or unable to be contacted. Well, Melina has since checked in and is safe and all right. Also, another wrestling-related story to the wildfires, Jeremy Padower, who is the CBO, or Chief Brand Officer of Jazzwares, who makes the AEW action figures and toys, as well as a very well-known collector of toys and wrestling memorabilia, has lost everything in his home. He did report on X that he and his family are all right, and even after losing everything, he stressed that people matter way more than stuff. We send our best wishes to him and his family. Well, if you're a fan of AEW's Darby Allin, you're going to have to watch some of those greatest hits on Max or YouTube, because he is reportedly not going to be on AEW TV for several months. The report is that Darby is looking to once again try and scale Mount Everest. This is something that he tried to do last year and suffered a broken foot during a match at AEW Big Business. And then don't forget, he was hit by a bus in New York at one point. It just wasn't going well for Darby Allin at all. Nevertheless, Darby now slated to be off for some time, do the climb, and then return to AEW. Last time Darby was on AEW TV was on Christmas Day, but then was taken out by Jon Moxley and the Death Riders. Another story to come out of the business side of wrestling this week is that former WWE owner and CEO Vince McMahon has been ordered to pay a fine by the SEC. Now, this had to do with the hush money payments that were made using WWE money instead of his own. He's been ordered to repay WWE as well as pay a fine to the tune of $400,000. Of course, other legal concerns for McMahon include the Janelle Grant civil suit, which is going to be resuming at some point, as well as the notorious Ring Boy lawsuit, which alleges that Vince, as well as his wife and other officials in the company, knew about improprieties that were going on in the company decades ago. There's also been rumors that Vince may be starting up some sort of a new company soon, although nothing has officially been announced at this time. And while this news came out almost 2 weeks ago, on January 1st, we found out that wrestling legend Sweet Daddy Siki has passed away. Siki passed away on New Year's Eve after a long battle with dementia, and if you haven't read Greg Oliver's article yet talking about the life of Siki and his friendship with Elkin James, or Sweet Daddy Siki, you can read that now, again, at slamwrestling.net. It's a beautiful piece and an amazing, amazing character and contributor to the world of pro wrestling. We're going to try and talk to Greg as well as others in the future about the life of Sweet Daddy Siki, but if you don't know anything about the guy, look him up because there's a lot of history there. Well, still to come, we have Dave Meltzer standing by from the Wrestling Observer. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff going on in the business of professional wrestling, and Joe Aguinaldo and I have a little chat talking about John Cena and where this retirement tour could be taking him.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
CKXUFM 88.3 in Lethbridge is Southern Alberta's true alternative radio station.
The cream of the crop. Nobody does it better.
Proudly carrying McGuire on Wrestling every week.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to listen to,
This is gonna be a slobber knocker!
check out our NCRA award-winning lineup of programs or stream us anytime at ckxu.com.
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, it's been a few weeks since we talked to this guy live and for the latest, but once again joining us, Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com. Happy New Year, Dave.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, did you get up to any shenanigans for the big New Year's Eve?
Nah, I was pretty quiet New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
I was just out with some friends. That's about it.
Well, at least you went out. I did laundry. So.
Okay, I didn't do laundry.
It's a little different up here, though. I mean, it's a lot colder. There's a lot less going on where I am right now, and it's funny. I don't know what it's like down there. I mean, obviously, right now talking about fire and fireworks is an awful thing, but I mean, like, are fireworks even a thing for New Year's in San Jose or your area there?
I wasn't in San Jose, but I mean, I heard a lot of fireworks. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I was somewhere else. I was in another city.
Yeah. And speaking of that, though, where you are, I mean, obviously all eyes are on Southern California. You're about 4.5, 5 hours north of there from LA proper. How are things affecting you in that area?
I mean, it's funny because it was so windy and we have no wind at all. And it's just amazing to me about climate because we're not that far away. And I would be thinking if there's this horrible wind, we'd be feeling it. And we didn't. But I mean, oh my God, this devastation. It's sad on so many fronts. And it's even worse because anyone who's ever dealt with insurance companies, there's another round of disasters these people have to face, dealing with the insurance companies. And then I don't know if you know this, but a lot of insurance companies won't even insure for fire in California. So the insurance rates are going to go through the roof and people aren't going to be able to get insurance. The long term of this is very devastating that people aren't talking about. I mean, what's happening last week, it's just, we have fires in Northern California all the time. One of my best friend's house burned down, was a former player with the Bears, burned down many years ago. Henry Cejudo in UFC, I think, had to jump out a window or off a balcony or something. He was in that same fire, but he ended up being okay. But I mean, my kids had house burned down across the street. It's scary. It's really scary.
The reach of this in the entertainment community is going to be so widespread as well, just because of where everything is. So, I mean, when Steve Gutenberg is going on the news and running up to a camera saying, leave your car keys and I can move your car out of the way so we can get fire trucks in, I mean, it's crazy how much is going on down there.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah, I mean, I spent all day, yesterday pretty much just trying to get a hold of friends there, and all of them were okay. But, I mean, I know the region, I've driven the region. It's really, I mean, they're okay, but I mean, like, basically, they say you go outside and it's like, Soot City, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like they're not hampered by it. It's like, basically, you go out and it's Armageddon, but their house is okay, but I mean, the smell and everything like that, I mean, it's there. We haven't had any effects yet, but like I said, we're hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
But the idea, it really hits you because it could happen here.
Well, our best to everybody, obviously, who's fighting the fires and who's trying to recover from that. Let's shift gears and talk about what we talk about here, and that is, of course, the world of pro wrestling. Dave, it's been a busy few weeks since you and I last spoke. Of course, New Japan had their big show, as they always do, down in Tokyo Dome, and then it was followed by Wrestle Dynasty the next day. And then, of course, there was this little Netflix launch for WWE and a whole bunch of stuff in between. But it's been World's End as well for AEW. NWA had stuff going on. TNA had stuff going on. Like, there's just stuff everywhere. But, I mean, for you over the last few weeks here, what has been probably the story that's been the most reactive for you as far as people talking about in the wrestling world?
I mean, the Netflix debut is the biggest of anything. And to an extent, AEW, starting on Max in the United States, too. Which is also a big story. It's a similar story, but those two stories combined, we're on the ground floor. We don't really know how this ends up. It's an upgrade for Raw to be on Netflix from USA. I think that's pretty safe to say. And as far as
domestic standpoint, for sure, internationally, it's huge because I've got friends that obviously know I'm a wrestling guy. And they're reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I'm seeing WWE on Netflix now. That's kind of cool." And they're even checking out some stuff. So,
I mean, is that bigger in Canada than being on Sportsnet?
Oh, it's huge. It's
okay.
Huge.
Okay. I mean, I know in the United States, it's bigger than USA. It's not bigger than Fox. Like if the show that they had on Monday had been on a Friday on Fox with the same, matches and the same, rock and scene and everything, it would have drawn a bigger number on Fox. It would not, it would not have drawn a bigger number on USA. So it's big, but I mean, and in the long run, Netflix is going to be bigger than Fox 5 years from now anyway. So, I mean, so it's not like, and we're playing the long game. So, I mean, it's a great move. From a publicity standpoint, they got a lot of publicity. Like, I did a ton of interviews, on that subject. With major publications and major media sources. I mean, to the media here, the fact that they were on Netflix itself, just being on Netflix was a huge story. Certainly compared to AEW, which I have not done one interview regarding AEW to Max. But that's an interesting story too. It's not as big, but it's an interesting one because it does make the validity of the ratings a lot less. So the ability to track how things are doing from a television rating standpoint is far more difficult than it was just a few weeks ago. It's really changed that. Well, I mean, we're still going to know how they're doing because every day we get, or every week we get, multiple shows that we can see the attendance of every week. So we'll kind of know how, from a popularity standpoint, but judging that popularity by ratings is going to be far more difficult.
Well, and the difference there too is that the money's already paid for a lot of these deals, right? That's the other thing where
for 3 years for AEW and for WWE. I mean, WWE is WWE. I don't think that we have to worry about that for decades, or at least a decade. I mean, it's like things always change, but I think WWE is safe for, I don't want to say forever because there's nothing forever is, you can never say forever, but 10 years.
But they're not pulling the water coolers out of the building anytime soon.
No.
Okay, we were talking to Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com. This is McGuire on Wrestling. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the actual shows and some of the things going on with the TV, how WWE has already drawn a stark contrast between what's on Netflix and what's on TV, and a lot more next. Thanks for being here.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Hey, yo, how many of you here came to listen to your same generic wrestling podcast? Or how many of you came to listen to the alternate commentary table every single Saturday?
You're going to get our perspective of what the real fans of wrestling think, and no one does it like us.
Subscribe and stream to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed anywhere where you're streaming your podcasts. Survey says one more for the Greek guys.
Chair shot.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Back with Dave Meltzer. We were just talking about the ratings and how things are going to be changing with WWE, AEW now with their streaming partnerships. Obviously, in the U.S., network TV still a big factor here in Canada and a lot of international markets. Not all, because there are still some international TV deals out there, and that's why Raw still has commercial breaks. But Monday Night Raw...
Well, for Netflix in the United States, they're always going to have commercial breaks. I mean, it was one of the reasons Netflix wanted the show was so they could start get used to start selling more ads on their live content.
Yeah, but here in Canada, they're actually dropping. They'll fade to black, and then they come back to live action. So a lot of the international feeds, we just get straight match. But
internationally, they're not having ads. That's true.
What was interesting, though, on SmackDown is that rather than just sticking with the matches, they actually went to this looping film of just slow motion wrestlers saying, "We'll be right back." So it was interesting that they didn't actually drop to black and then come back with live action for the SmackDown feed. The Netflix experience for Canadians here and internationally for those that have it, very, very different for a lot of us here because, well, it's just a lot more accessible. Like you were asking me before, the difference between Sportsnet and Netflix. I mean, lots more households, I feel, have Netflix than they did have the WWE subscription through Sportsnet here because it just wasn't a thing, you know? And the price point, too. I mean, the price point is almost exactly the same, but now you're getting Netflix with everything, whereas it was the same price basically for just WWE content. And then if you wanted NHL content or the actual networks themselves, these were all a la carte charges you had to pay on top of it. So
really?
Oh, yeah. Value-wise, it's way better here. So you get a little extra stuff. You get all the TV shows and whatnot with it. So I know a lot of international fans pretty much celebrating. Plus, we got the whole catalog. They're adding a lot of WWE content right now. None of the WCW or Smoky Mountain or ECW.
I don't expect any of that stuff on Netflix. You know, any of the AWA and World Class and any of that stuff. No.
Do you think it'll appear anywhere?
Only on the Vault thing. And I'm sure it'll appear there all the time. Yeah.
I guess YouTube, might be the other place. So,
yeah, they could start. I wonder. I mean, I would say they could probably start like a YouTube channel, but I wonder what the contract with Netflix says about that. I guess. Well, they have. That's not the problem. It's not just Netflix. They have to worry about the contract that they signed with USA and with CW also for at least the next 5 years.
Well, that SmackDown that didn't air in Canada conventionally that aired on YouTube, they actually didn't list the link. They did make it available, but it's funny, you couldn't share it. And then once the show aired, it was up for about a day, and then that whole episode is gone. So yeah, there's definitely something fugazi going on with that deal. But nevertheless, let's talk about the actual show here, because I feel like we could talk about the distribution for days here. But the actual show itself, Monday Night Raw, was heralded by many fans as pretty overall a success. What were your thoughts coming out of the thing?
I thought it was a huge success. I mean, just the feel of everything. It just, WWE felt hot, you know? That's what I would say. You know, you watch it and it felt like a real big thing. You know, some people will complain that it wasn't really very episodic, but that wasn't the goal. This goal was to produce a very simple show with a lot of star power, try to link the stars of the past, like Undertaker with Rhea Ripley, Dwayne with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, you know, and try to, like, you know, give people the rub, as they say. That was the idea of the show. I think the show accomplished what it set out to do greatly. I think from a production standpoint, you know, the audience looked great. They reacted great. You know, they did a $4.5 million gate, which is boggles the mind in an arena setting. You know, I mean, these ticket prices are so ridiculously high now, even compared to like 2 years ago. But you know, I mean, that shows the fact that these ticket prices are so high and they're selling out the building. I mean, what do you say? You know, they're just they're starting to reach UFC levels, and they're owned by the same people who own UFC. So that's the direction. But yeah, no, I thought that as a show, as an introduction for new people, I thought it was very successful. You know, I think some people will go like, if and when next week's numbers come out, they will be way down. Of course, they'll be way down, right? Rock's not going to be on the show. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hulk's not going to be on the show.
Well, I don't know if that'll hurt things or not. But.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing, but you know, you're not going to have Seth Rollins and CM Punk and Roman Reigns and Solo, you know, both wrestling on the exact same television show with like a Rhea Ripley match with Liv Morgan that's the culmination of a feud that's been going on for like close to a year, it feels like. So the thing is like, yes, the numbers will be down next week, but that's expected. Like when they come out and you go, oh God, they're down. Of course they're going to be down. That's not even anything to worry about.
I think the letdown has already happened for a lot of fans, just comparing Raw to SmackDown, though, because, I mean, that Raw really was, I mean, from a caliber standpoint, it did feel like a WrestleMania level show. Whereas
production-wise, it did. Yeah.
SmackDown, well, even with some of the matches, some of the hype, I mean, yeah, we didn't have a world title match. Well, we had the women's world title match, I guess. But, I mean, we didn't have either champion make a significant appearance as far as the men go. But SmackDown on Friday, oh my Lord, the vitriol from fans that were watching that show compared to the celebration of Raw. I mean, is that justified, or is that just fans got to brace themselves for, you know what, we're still going to be wrestling fans. We're still going to be watching 3-hour shows now. It's still going to feel
3 hours on Friday. 3 hours on Friday night's a challenge. I don't think that that's the best idea, but if they're, I mean, it's temporary. They're going back to 2 hours in whatever it is, May or June. It is a difference, but I mean, look, WWE's doing good. They're doing really good. That's all. Friday is normal. This Monday is probably going to be a lot more normal of a Raw show. This last Monday show was totally not normal. It was a once a year thing, and it's not indicative of what the product can be every week. Because if you did that every week, the problem is that you'd be undermining your own stars by focusing so much on stars from another era.
All right. Well, while we're here, it's been talked to death, I feel already, but I do have to go into the Hogan direction here because, I mean, if there was ever a case of not reading the room before you put this guy out there, I mean, dear Lord.
Everyone makes mistakes. You would sit there and go like, oh, he hasn't been on TV in a long time. The people go crazy. The music played, they went crazy. And then, once the music stopped, a lot of that's mob mentality. People start booing and then it gets louder and louder because it becomes the cool thing to do in the room. You're like, it used to happen to Cena all the time too.
Okay, but for Cena, it was for a lot different reasons. I feel there was a lot more behind this Hogan thing than just we're tired of seeing you. Because like you said, we haven't seen him on TV in a long time. But was it the location? Was it the fact that it was L.A.? Was it
I don't know.
Election stuff? Was it the beer? What is it with this guy?
It's not the beer. It's either, if you say that it's the association with Trump and it's L.A., they didn't boo Stephanie McMahon, whose mom has 100 times more to do with Trump than Hulk Hogan does.
Right.
They didn't boo Undertaker, who, campaigned heavily on his podcast for Trump, including interviewing him. Mm-hmm. So it would be the same thing. They didn't boo him. Could it be the shtick that Hogan was doing is very dated today? I mean, that's the thing that hit me like a brick. It's like we see these interviews with Drew McIntyre and Punk and Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes and Seth and everybody, Heyman. And then what Hogan did, which was great in its day, is so dated. I don't think that's it, but I'm just saying it really hit me like, man, 71-year-old guy, and he's out there trying to, be the muscle guy, and it just doesn't work. You've got to change. You can't be the same person. Chris Jericho isn't the same person he was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? It's like you've got to change. But I think, I think it also could be, it's pretty hard to run from that racism thing.
That's a big part of it too. And then tying that with the fact that Hulk Hogan is very reflective of Vince McMahon and that era as well. I mean, those two things combined, I think, could have been the silver bullet in this thing, don't you?
I don't think Vince. I think the racism could be a key part. I think there's a really good chance of that. Because if you remember when he went years ago, the last time they really tried to focus on him, which was that Tampa WrestleMania, I think it was.
Oh, they put him out there with Titus O'Neil. They
put him out there with Titus O'Neil, which actually made it worse, as everyone knows, and he got booed there too. So it could be that. I don't know. If he shows up in San Antonio, because originally he was going to be all over the San Antonio. No, I don't say all over, but he was going to be a big part of the San Antonio Saturday Night's Main Event on January 25th. If he's not, then they've soured on him. If he is, but they only show him backstage because they don't want to risk it, that'll tell you something. If he comes out and they don't boo him, then you could say, well, it was one night in LA and whatever. I mean, the January 25th thing will basically be the answer. But my gut is that they won't put him out in front of the people. That's my gut.
Are fans justified after celebrating this guy? And you know, I always felt conflicted. I mean, when the video came out, obviously, I mean, for me, it was like I had a picture of Hogan and I together at a WrestleCon that I had up in my office. And I was like, well, I'm taking that down. You know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things where it's like, you know, like after all these years of lauding the guy. And I mean, I talked to Joe Aguinaldo on our show about this. We did a one night only Raw review. We talked about it in depth there. And I mean, we were both at WrestleMania 18 screaming to the heavens for this guy. Like, I mean, it was one of the greatest moments ever as fans. But after all the crummy stuff and really, really nasty stuff that's gone on, I think a lot of fans, especially in our demographic, and there's some that aren't, but many are just tired of kind of being lied to by this guy, which is funny to say about criticizing a pro wrestler.
But it's funny because of pro wrestlers because from that generation, every promoter and every wrestler did nothing but lie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't say every, but the majority.
No, but that's what the basis of this whole entertainment. This is like going to a magic show. You're being there to be sucked into believing what you're seeing is
there's
real.
Difference between that. No. I mean, there's difference between that. You can be honest away from the ring. Okay, it's like, yes, the match is predetermined and they know who's going to win and we all know that and everything, but it's like going to a movie where you get all excited. You know it's not real. Wrestling, you know that aspect is not real, although there's realism to it, obviously. But as far as like stuff that doesn't matter, those guys, you know, most of the people in wrestling were liars. I mean, not all of them, but most of them. You know, I had to deal with that for, you know, God knows how long, right?
We're on the radio, Dave. We can't say that word.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? You know what I mean? But the racial comments that he made, like, I mean, you can't look the other way. And he's never really atoned for them. You know, which I think is the big one, is that, like, if he went in there and just said, I am so sorry, you know, publicly. And he never, I mean, he's tried to say, well, you know, I mean, he's never really atoned for them. And it doesn't get, like, to me, it's like if you bring that thing up to me and go like, remember what he said? And it's like, man, that's a hard one to digest. I mean, really hard. It's the worst. And unfortunately, that may be a lot of it. I mean, we don't know. And, you know, again, like the next time he appears, if there is a next time, you know, I've heard people go like, oh, put him with a New Day. And it's just like, oh, God.
Oh, God,
I mean, I actually can get like the idea of like using that to get heat for the New Day because they're associating with Hogan. But to me, now you're doing like, that's
poor taste. That's
like
taste.
Your worst taste heat. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think they're going to go for that at all. If anything, I think WWE now, with especially getting more and more advertisers on board. And, you know, people are saying, well, you know, they're owned by the same company that owns UFC and they let all those guys and girls get away with all sorts of stuff. But WWE to me still seems like they're trying to walk that family entertainment line. UFC has never been something like, hey, bring the kids down and watch people try to murder each other, you know? Yeah. Whereas, yeah, WWE, I don't see that being a thing. Okay. I feel like we could stay on this Hogan thing forever as well here, but I do want to talk a little bit about New Japan and what happened at the Tokyo Dome over a couple days, obviously. One of the stories that I found interesting was the commentator, Chris Charlton, for getting a little heated in his discussion about AEW and what I saw and heard. Okay, I mean, yeah, he was going a little stiff with it, but still, it was commentary that I wouldn't expect anything less if we were trying to set up a war between any other companies. I mean, you look back.
They weren't.
There's no angle.
There's no angle. No.
There's no angle at all between New Japan and AEW as far as the rivalry goes.
No. Their public is that we work together. We have no problems, even though there's always problems when you work with someone. But no. There's no angle. There's no AEW versus New Japan angle coming or anything like that. If there was, he wouldn't be suspended. He was suspended because Gabe Kidd did promos trying to make that match that, but it's one thing. I think that the thing is it's one thing for, especially in Japan, if you understand, it's one thing for a foreign wrestler to say dumb stuff because foreign wrestlers are allowed to do that. That's kind of like the thing there. But your announcer, even though Chris is not Japanese, he works for New Japan. Yeah. And the announcers, they don't have like, he's not a heel announcer. He's the guy who translates. He's the voice of reason. And that's the problem. It's like, he went in there and he like, you don't insult your business partner. And I think that that's the thing, is that like, and again, so people, a lot of people, like, for whatever reason, like, blame this on Tony Khan, and it's like, it's like, now you're like fantasy booking you're in your own head. This was Kadani. This wasn't even Tanahashi. This was above Tanahashi. This was the president of Bushiroad. This would be equivalent to not Vince, not Dana, not Nick Khan. This is Ari Emanuel from the heavens going to all those people. It's like, we don't want to insult our business partner on this show. You're suspended, and that's what happened. This was not a New Japan decision, and it certainly wasn't an AEW decision, and there was no ultimatums made or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that so much. I was just more interested into whether or not this guy was buying into the angle and maybe just crossed the line, or if the feeling is he went into business for himself. I don't think he went that far. I don't think he was trying to.
Well, the money mark line is not a line that they wanted to do on their with a business partner that has really helped them out a lot. I mean, look, that show that they were on was was an AEW show too. So it's like, if I've said this to people, if Stu Fulton, who does the Noah show, when Nakamura wrestled Uka Sasaki on the first, if he went in there on this diatribe of like saying the worst things you could about Levesque or Nick Khan, it's like, number one, he's losing his job in an instant, and number two, WWE's going like, your announcers double crossed us. We're not even going to do business with you.
Yeah, that's inside baseball then.
Yeah, that's what would happen there. So I mean, everyone got off, because the reality is that AEW is showing no signs of not wanting to do business. They're fine, and Chris didn't lose his job. I mean, he got suspended for 2 months.
Yeah,
he'll be back, and they need him. I'm a big fan of Chris Charlton as an announcer, and most people are, and that's what made people really mad, because they are. But it's like, I really do. I was watching it and I was going like, what the hell is he doing? It's just like, it's one thing to play into that thing, but once you do the money mark line, it's kind of like, man, you're out there trying to be like the fraud podcaster guys. AEW ain't going to be happy with that at all, because that's the deal that they fight constantly on the home front, and New Japan, they're Tanahashi ain't going to be happy with that, and Kadani was hotter than all of them. I mean, he said, like, after the show was over, before there was any controversy, he said, we had a real problem with our English announcing. He didn't mention any names, but when I heard that, it's just like, oh boy, I know what that problem was.
Well, you know what? I mean, having sat in that chair, not at that scale, but I mean, even doing daily radio shows, you always try and be fearful of saying something that'll get you knocked off the air one way or another. So, I mean, hopefully, if anything, Buddy just kind of takes it and gets to come back and do what he does, because I mean, everybody wants that spot, but I mean, it's not a case of, I don't know the guy at all. I've never met him. I've never talked to him, so I don't know anything about him. But
he's a nice guy, and he's really good at what he does.
That's what I figure. I mean, I've always enjoyed hearing him, but I don't know anything about him outside of that. So I wish the best for him. Hopefully this whole thing blows over. But I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't an angle here involved that maybe fans are just getting a little too overexcited about. I don't know. But
no.
All right, Dave, we had a great discussion today. I mean, I feel like when we're gone this long, we can still talk for days, but unfortunately we are out of time. I do want to give you some time to give people a little reason to go and check out the Wrestling Observer, of course. I mean, the website, your newsletters have all been happening. It's all been going on over the last 3 weeks. But what are some highlights that people can read about and catch up on if they haven't read in a little while?
I mean, like from a business standpoint, we really go into depth on the Netflix thing. Big long story on the show and everything like that, and of course, both Tokyo Dome shows. The story on the death of Hangman Harris. I'm going to do a big story on Sweet Daddy Siki, hopefully this coming week. I think that.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that because I'm actually seeing Brett in a couple weeks.
Brett, it's one of his favorites.
Well, it's his absolute favorite, and we were talking actually, and he was in tears like when we were talking about it. But
wow. Yeah, I haven't talked to Brett. I've actually texted and
I'm talking to him this week, so I will see if I can get him to either give me stuff or give it to you, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, because we're going to talk a lot about Sweet Daddy. So
I mean, I feel that the coverage of him has not been commensurate to what he deserves. Very strongly, by the way, including by me. Although I did write a story on it, but he's a pretty interesting historical figure. Just because, it's like it was, wasn't that many years ago, and just the fact, he's from Texas, and he ended up in Toronto largely because of American racism. That's really the reason. He married a white woman, in the 60s, I believe it was in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it was just, I hate to say this, but it's like the racism in the United States, plus he was in a business that was pretty racist, I think. Every promoter, like back then, the promoters were still like geared towards the dollar. Like if you could draw the money, you'd be okay. And he was he was enough to where he could do that, but he still left for Canada and, lived in Toronto from 61 on 62 on, I think.
Oh, Dan Lavransky used to go do karaoke with him every weekend. It was,
it was funny. I was in Toronto once and they actually brought up, hey, let's go to I forgot the name of the place, but the place, right?
The Duke.
Yeah. Go see Siki and do karaoke, which I never did. But, and he helped train Edge and Christian and Joey Legend and people like that, with Ron Hutchison and everything. And so he has that tie with those people as well. But the, all of those guys, it's a really interesting story that's never really been written or told. And, the original group of, Bobo Brazil, Sweet Daddy Siki, Bearcat Wright, that kind of like, I don't say broke the color barrier because we had that going back to the 20s, but became like major stars. I always hear people today like talk about, Junkyard Dog, and I'm not dissing Junkyard Dog, okay, at all. But there was a generation before Junkyard Dog, which was, and Siki was one of the key guys in that generation.
All right. Well, you know what? We will touch more on Sweet Daddy Siki. Let me know when you're kind of midway through that. And like I said, I'll get everybody in touch. Greg Oliver has also done an amazing story about that over at Slam Wrestling. But, I'm interested to compare notes between your story and his, and then, of course, with Brett and everybody. But we will be doing a show kind of like what we did with Leo Burke here on the Celebrate Wrestling pods, but we're going to try and tailor it more towards just telling Sweet Daddy Siki's story, because I think it is one that, like you said, deserves to be told. So, yeah, we'll talk more about Sweet Daddy as well. Dave, we are plumb out of time, but great to talk to you again, and we'll catch up again next week. Sound good?
Okay, great. Have a great week.
All right. Thanks a lot. Coming up next, more McGuire on Wrestling. Thanks for being here.
I'm not just going to the Royal Rumble. I'm going to win the Royal Rumble. You want some? Come get some.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
That was John Cena on the Netflix premiere of WWE's Monday Night Raw, declaring not only that he plans on being in the Royal Rumble, but he is going to, in fact, win the Royal Rumble and thus become a 17-time world champion. Joining us now, he is my cohort, my partner in crime for many a pod, including a re-revival for one night only of Tuesday Morning Cooked, which you can catch on the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Joe Aguinaldo is here. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm really good. It's been an up and down week for watching wrestling. Raw was this pinnacle mountain of a program, and then Dynamite was pretty good, staying consistent, and then SmackDown was painful.
Yeah, I'll admit, I was actually kind of looking forward to watching SmackDown, and as the show went, it was like, this is actually really hard to watch. Like even the and I think what really got me was the when all the women started fighting near the beginning of the show, like Bayley was there, and I think it was like Naomi and Bianca and Nia Jax and all this stuff. Like I just remember thinking this, like, for the people that are in the ring, that was insanely sloppy. You know what I mean? Like it honestly looked really bad. And I was like, oh man, I feel bad for these women because this looks horrible. Like it looked horrible. And then I just couldn't get back into the show.
For me, it wasn't even that. Like, I mean, in-ring shenanigans and everything else aside, I'm never going to get that hard on that unless something really terrible happens. But for me, it was just doom, 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 which is the music that anybody watching the international feed of SmackDown on Netflix heard during every commercial break for 3 minutes.
And like even that, like I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're in a commercial break, whatever. And then after like the second time, it was like, okay, can we stop this, please? Like even put something else on. And then the third time it was like, oh my God. And
you're actually missing commercials. You're like, you know what? I could do 3 minutes of ads right now. This would be fun.
Exactly. And that was the thing. Like that didn't help. Like I understand what they were doing and I know they have to do it, but it did not help at all.
It was the worst on hold music you could think of. Anyway, the worst on hold music is that, and I don't know if your company uses it, but when you get on hold with like a doctor's office or something, and it's that whoosh,
oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, everybody's heard that music, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get on to John Cena here, though, and of course, we are actually working on new episodes of We've Seen a Movie. We've kind of let John Cena's film career slide a bit for us here. But now that he's taken a little more time off, we are going to jump in to doing more John Cena movie reviews. But let's talk about that moment on Monday Night Raw. Everybody, of course, was happy to see him. He cuts the promo, and then he says he's going to win the Royal Rumble and thus get that 17th championship. So, Joe, I have to ask you, do you think that that's going to be the path over this year for John Cena to become a 17-time champion?
You know what? I like without knowing who else and what other storylines are in there. I'm going to say that that's an early favorite. If that is in fact the way that they go with John Cena,
it's simple, right? Like it's almost too easy though.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, sometimes keep it simple, right? Sometimes that's the best way to go.
Yeah, but everybody thought that was going to be the case with Cody when he came back and won the first time and then goes into the main event and all of a sudden doesn't win the title, right? So
that's fair, but you also had like sort of the Dwayne Johnson effect, which you're not going to have with Cena, right?
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't think Cena's going after that belt. I think he's going after the Gunther belt.
You think so?
Well, just because with all the storylines that are wrapped around the Cody belt, for lack of a better way to call it, but like you've got like the bloodline stuff, you've got Kevin Owens. I think I can't see them putting that belt on Cena.
CM Punk is also owed a favor though.
That's what I mean.
So could one of these matches become a triple threat? Who knows?
Oh dear, I hope not.
But okay, let's say Cena wins the Rumble. That's the path of least resistance.
Okay.
Let's say he doesn't win the Rumble. He goes on to Elimination Chamber. Does he win that instead to get the title shot for the other championship?
I still think it's the Rumble that he wins.
Okay.
If he's going to win anything.
Yeah, I don't know if I see Cena in an Elimination Chamber match just because of the risk of potential injury.
Yep.
But then again, I mean, you can do anything safely. He doesn't need to go in there and do a ton of stuff.
And that's fair too. But I still think that the Rumble makes the most sense. Plus, it's the bigger match. And remember, this is Cena's farewell tour, so you want to put him in situations that are going to have the most impact.
Okay, scenario number 3. He doesn't win either of those. He becomes a late contender for SummerSlam-ish.
Okay.
Does he get there? Out of the 3 there, which is your most favorable one?
Oof. Okay, again, my own personal opinion. I personally would like to see him win the Rumble and win a belt.
You're sticking with the Rumble, okay?
At WrestleMania. But my second option would be later on in the year, i.e. a SummerSlam. But again, you want to look at your biggest impact, right?
Last choice. We go all the way to December. And he gets a last chance bout. And he's got the one match left in his, 36 or 38 date appearances here. Then he wins the title, retires as champion.
I can't see that happening just because I would like to think that part of Cena winning the belt would be him also putting someone over one final time.
I agree 100% with that. I think that is the least likely scenario.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that could happen, stay with me here, John Cena does not win the championship.
No, you know what? That is absolutely that's definitely a possibility. In fact, I think he's even said that he doesn't want it, right? So, again, it could happen, but if it doesn't, not 100% surprised either.
I think a Summer of Cena run would be the best case scenario. If he wins it at WrestleMania, great. Carry that title for the summer, loses it at SummerSlam, puts over whoever, and then has a farewell program with whoever he wants to.
Yeah, I love that scenario mainly because, we've actually talked about this now like 3 weeks or so, but it's like, here's a guy that deserves it, and it's time to what's the word I want to use? It's time to modernize or create that legend, because we haven't had that in, let's say, 2 decades or 3 decades, right?
Yeah, we're still waiting on that name. Roman's getting there. Roman's getting there.
Right.
I love seeing the Instagram videos of like people with their kids who stop dead, and when they hear Roman's music and they're playing or whatever, and they hear Roman's music, and all of a sudden the kid just pops up the one. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, but and the thing is, like Roman, I think, okay, let's take even Gunther. So you've got Gunther, you've got Roman. Those are 2 guys where you've modernized those records. So it's no longer Honky Tonk Man. It's no longer, Hulk Hogan, let's say. You've got a generational
Demolition, all those. Yeah.
You've got a generational star, like a current star, who has one of those records. But you still have, and again, not a bad thing, but you still have Ric Flair as the 16 or 23-time champion, depending on which piece of paper you read. And I think it's time to get that updated.
All right. Well, there's some scenarios. We would love to hear your feedback. Join the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Join the commentary. How do you think John Cena's final program should look? And who would you like to see him elevate as he leaves on the way out the door here? Take your feedback there. Joe, last thing for you, buddy. Raw's this Monday. What do they got to do to make it better than SmackDown?
If you're talking about this SmackDown, not much. Come on. Like, seriously?
That's enough. That's it right there. All right, folks, enjoy the week in wrestling. We'll be back to talk about it next week with you right here. Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed is where you can find all our shows. Don't forget, it's not just this one. You get the return of the alternate commentary table. You get the return of Legends and Champions, and soon the return of We've Seen a Movie, all this week, except for maybe that We've Seen a Movie one. We'll see. But until next time, thank you for listening and letting us do what we do. Play safe, drive safe. Be seen ya.
Thanks for listening to McGuire on Wrestling. To be a part of the show, follow our social media or leave a tip. Head to McGuireShow.com. McGuire on Wrestling, online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at McGuireShow.com.